Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? This time we're tackling faith and miracles, and we've got some powerful stories to unpack from a recent podcast episode.
Yeah, these aren't just tales of the extraordinary. It's more about how people find strength and meaning when they're facing some really tough challenges.
Exactly, it's about resilience. So imagine this, you're Sarah, and your business is about to go under, bills are piling up, stress is through the roof.
It's that feeling of hitting a wall, not knowing where to turn. Many entrepreneurs have been there, but even if you haven't faced business struggles, you can relate to that feeling of helplessness.
Totally. So Sarah turns to her faith. She prays for an investor, someone who believes in her vision. But was this just like a desperate, blind leap of faith?
Well, that's where things get interesting. The podcast episode mentions the prayer, but it doesn't really talk about what else she did. I mean, did she also network, try to find opportunities, improve her business plan?
It makes you wonder about the whole faith in action thing, right? Is it passive waiting, or does it push you to act?
It's a big question.
Okay, so get this. What happens next seems like a total miracle, at least from Sarah's point of view.
Oh.
She gets a call, completely out of the blue, from this guy she met at a networking event ages ago. He tells her he's been praying about investing, and something told him to call Sarah.
Wow, the timing is incredible. You can really hear the relief and joy in her voice when she talks about it in the episode. It makes sense why she sees it as divine intervention.
It does. But could there be, other ways to look at it?
Of course. I mean, maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe the investor was going through his contacts, looking for someone in Sarah's field. Or, think about this, maybe prayer changed Sarah's mindset, made her more open to opportunities she might have missed otherwise.
It makes you think about how our beliefs shape the way we see the world, right?
Exactly. Belief and action, they're all tangled up together. Sometimes just believing can open up new possibilities, not in some mystical way, but by changing how we act and making us see new opportunities.
Okay, so that's Sarah's story. But we've got another one to dive into, David's story. This one might hit close to home for a lot of people. He's diagnosed with a chronic illness, something with no known cure. Imagine the feeling. It's like your life is spiraling.
Yeah, it's that feeling of powerlessness, right? Losing control over your health, your future. It's a universal fear. Just like with Sarah facing financial ruin, David's story taps into something we all worry about.
Absolutely. And just like Sarah, David finds comfort in his faith. He focuses on this verse from the book of Jeremiah. I will restore you to health and heal your wounds, declares the Lord. That becomes his mantra, his source of strength when things are really dark.
It's amazing how powerful certain words or texts can be for people. Like an anchor in a storm, they offer hope and a connection to something bigger than ourselves.
So there's this turning point. David goes for a routine checkup, and the doctor is just stunned.
What happened?
His condition, the one that was supposed to be incurable, it's dramatically better. No medical explanation. David, of course, believes it's a miracle. A direct answer to his prayers.
This is where things get a little tricky. It's such a powerful story, and you want to believe it, but we have to remember that even with chronic illnesses, people can sometimes experience spontaneous remission.
Right, we don't have the full picture. There might be other things that played a role that we don't know about.
Exactly, maybe lifestyle changes, an experimental treatment, something like that. But even if we acknowledge those possibilities, it doesn't diminish the power of David's experience, right? It actually adds another layer to it. How did his belief affect his actions, his outlook? Could that have played a role, even indirectly, in his healing?
Yeah, it makes you think. So we've heard two pretty incredible stories, both about facing huge challenges and then experiencing these amazing turnarounds. Let's take a minute just to process.
Absolutely. Both Sarah and David's stories, they touch on those deep human experiences. It's remarkable how different their stories are on the surface, one about finances, the other about health, but they both come back to these similar themes.
It really shows how universal these experiences are, right? You face adversity, you turn to your faith for support, and then somehow things change for the better. It's not just a religious thing either. It's like a story of human resilience.
You're right. It's a common thread throughout history. And it brings us to some bigger questions, like how much does our belief shape what happens to us? Both Sarah and David saw their breakthroughs as divine intervention, but could their belief itself have been a driving force even if there wasn't a direct, intervention?
So maybe it wasn't just about God stepping in, but about how their faith gave them the strength to keep going, to stay open to new possibilities.
That's the idea. Belief can be a powerful catalyst. It shapes how we see things, how we act, and that can change the course of our lives. And it's not just about religious faith either. Believing in yourself, believing in your abilities, that can be just as powerful.
Right, like that saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So belief creates its own reality.
Yes.
But how does that actually work?
That's a fantastic question. Honestly, it's something scientists and psychologists are still trying to figure out. We know our beliefs shape our expectations, and those expectations affect how we behave. Like, if you believe you can achieve something, you're more likely to put in the effort and not give up when things get tough.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about faith specifically? Is there something unique about religious faith that makes it so powerful?
That's a tough one. There are some studies that show religious faith can give you a sense of meaning and purpose, which can be very powerful, especially during tough times. It can also create a sense of belonging and connection, which helps with stress and loneliness. Of course, you don't have to be religious to experience those things.
So the takeaway is that belief, whether it's religious or not, can have a huge impact on us, mentally and even physically.
Absolutely. And it's all connected to our human need to find meaning. Sarah and David, they were both in situations that could have led them to despair, to feel like their lives had no meaning. But through their faith, they were able to see things differently, to see purpose, even in the midst of suffering.
It's interesting. Both stories focus on the emotional impact, right? For Sarah, it was that relief, that feeling of her prayers being answered. And for David, it was the joy and gratitude that came with his unexpected healing. But it's more than just positive emotions, isn't it? Do these experiences also give them a deeper understanding of themselves or even of the world?
You hit the nail on the head. Those emotions are just the surface. They point to something deeper, that need to make sense of the world, to find something that helps us deal with life's challenges and understand where we fit in. We all search for meaning in different ways, whether it's through religion, philosophy, or just our personal values.
And that brings us to storytelling itself. Even in this short form, Sarah and David's stories really draw us in. Why is that? Why are we so fascinated by these kinds of personal stories?
Well, personal stories have a way of connecting with us on a deeper level. They take abstract ideas and make them real, make them personal. We see ourselves in those stories and we learn from what those people went through.
It's like a shared experience, even if we're just listening to a podcast. So, for our listeners, why should they care about these stories?
Well, for one, they offer hope and show the resilience of the human spirit. They remind us that even when things are tough, there's always a chance for things to get better. But more than that, they make us think about our own beliefs and how we find a meaning in our own lives, and how faith, whatever form it takes, plays a role in all of that.
Okay, so we're back, and we're still digging into faith and miracles. Before the break, we were talking about how belief can shape our experiences and how we, crave meaning, especially when things get rough. I don't know about you, but it's really got me thinking.
Yeah, it definitely makes you think. We've touched on the psychology of belief, the emotional side of it, but what about the philosophy of it all? These stories, they bring up some pretty deep questions about, well, reality itself, free will, and the limits of what we can understand.
Whoa, now we're going deep. I'm with you if you are. Where do we even start with all that?
Yeah. Let's start with miracles. Both Sarah and David saw what happened to them as divine interventions, things that defied logic and the odds. But what even is a miracle? Is it just something science can't explain yet, or is there something more to it?
Good question. What's a miracle to one person might be totally normal to someone else. Depends on how you see things. Right?
You got it. Our worldview, our beliefs, they color how we interpret everything. A religious person might see a sudden healing as proof of God's power, while a skeptic might say it's just luck or some unknown factor. Neither one is wrong, they just have different ways of looking at the world.
So how do you even talk about faith and miracles when people have such different starting points? Can you have a real conversation about it?
It's a challenge, for sure, but I think it's important to try, to listen to each other and be open-minded, even if we don't agree.
Okay, I get that. But what about critical thinking? We talk about considering other explanations for these miraculous events. Does that mean you have to give up your faith or your sense of wonder?
No, not at all. Critical thinking isn't about dismissing faith. It's more about engaging with it in a more thoughtful way. It's about asking questions, looking at things from different angles, and even being willing to challenge your own assumptions.
I like that. A more mature approach to faith. One that uses both reason and intuition.
Exactly. It's not an either-or thing. Faith and reason, they can work together.
Makes me think of that Carl Sagan quote. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. It's not about saying miracles can't happen. It's about being cautious and wanting strong proof.
That's a perfect example. Sagan, he was a scientist, but he also acknowledged that there's so much we don't know. He understood that our knowledge is limited and that there's always room for the unexpected.
Right. So maybe it's not about proving or disproving miracles, but about realizing that we don't know everything and being open to the idea that there might be forces out there that we just don't get yet.
I like that. Acknowledging the mystery, the unknown, without, throwing out our critical thinking. Finding that sweet spot between faith and reason, between wonder and skepticism.
Okay, I'm feeling a bit more grounded now, but we're still talking about some pretty big philosophical ideas here. You mentioned free will before. How do these stories about faith and miracles connect to how we understand choice and having control over our lives?
Free will. That's a whole other deep dive. But in these stories, it makes us ask, are we really in charge of our own destinies? Or are we, being guided by something else?
Okay, now that's a mind bender. Like, if Sarah's investor was guided by God to call her, does that mean her success was like fate? And what about David's healing? Did he choose that or was it given to him?
These questions have been around forever. If God exists and knows everything, some people say free will is just an illusion because, our actions are already known. But others believe that God gave us free will, even if our choices have consequences.
So no easy answers, huh?
No, not really. It all comes down to your theology, how you understand the scriptures. I think these stories, instead of giving us answers, they make us think about the whole idea of free will, divine intervention, and those random things that happen in life. It's all connected.
Yeah, it's not about finding a perfect explanation. It's more about facing the mystery, the uncertainty, and the amazingness of it all.
Exactly. And within that uncertainty, there's room for faith and doubt, reason, and wonder, all of it.
Okay, we've covered so much, from the psychology of belief to miracles and free will. It seems like these stories about faith and miracles raise more questions than they answer. Is that a bad thing?
No way. I think that's the best part. They make us think critically, question what we believe, and have meaningful discussions about things that matter to us.
I like that. It's not about finding all the answers. It's about the journey of exploring and discovering. But before we get too carried away with the big picture, let's bring it back down to earth for our listener. What are some things they can take away from this, regardless of what they believe?
Good question. One big takeaway is how powerful belief is. Whether it's faith in God, belief in yourself, or just hoping for a better future, our beliefs shape how we see things, how we feel, and what we do.
So it's not just about fate. We actually have a hand in creating our own reality through what we believe.
Right. And that ties into the whole meaning-making thing we talked about. Sarah and David found meaning in their experiences, even when things were tough. It shows how important it is to actively search for meaning in our own lives, to find something that helps us understand the ups and downs and figure out our place in the world.
I'm sensing a theme here. It sounds like these stories are about empowerment. They tell us that we have a choice in how we see things, how we handle tough times, and how we find meaning.
I love that. You're right. It's about the human spirit, our ability to hope, and our power to find strength and purpose even in the hardest situations. They remind us that we're not just victims of fate. We're active characters in our own stories.
That's powerful stuff. It's a message of hope and strength that everyone can relate to no matter what they believe. But I feel like we're just getting started. There's so much more to uncover.
For sure. These are conversations that can go on and on. They challenge us to keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep trying to understand more.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for another break. When we come back for the final part of our deep dives, we're going to talk about personal stories, how they shape our beliefs, and what these stories teach us about being human. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back for the last part of our deep dive. I feel like we've been on this incredible journey exploring faith and miracles. Talk about how belief works, what miracles might be, and even free will. But there's one more thing we need to talk about: the power of stories themselves.
It's amazing how Sarah and David's stories, even just these short versions, have stuck with us and got us thinking about such big ideas.
Seriously, as we were talking, I realized how much their stories, even without all the details, have really stayed with me. It's like I can picture everything so clearly.
That's the magic of a good story. They don't just give you facts, they make you feel things, connect with people, and take you to different places. We connect with the people in the story, feel what they feel, and learn from their ups and downs.
It's like we're right there with them, living it all, even though we're just listening. And it makes you wonder, Why are we so drawn to these kinds of stories? What is it about personal stories, especially about faith and miracles, that hits us so hard?
Well, I think it's a few things. First, we're naturally curious about the unknown, the mysterious stuff that happens in life. Miracles, things we can't explain, they fascinate us.
It's like we never lose that childlike sense of wonder, that wanting to believe in something bigger than ourselves.
Right. And these stories, they give us a peek into that world of possibility. They make us question what we think we know and consider that maybe, just maybe, there's more to life than we realize.
But it's not just about the amazing things that happen, right? It's about the human side of it, how these stories connect to what we've gone through ourselves.
Absolutely. We see parts of ourselves in these people and their journeys. We get their fears and doubts. We're happy when they succeed. And we learn from their mistakes. It reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles, that other people have faced similar things and come out stronger.
It's like sharing wisdom, passing down lessons from one generation to the next. And it's not just in religion. Think about all the stories we hear that inspire us, about people overcoming huge obstacles or showing incredible kindness and compassion.
Exactly. Stories go beyond culture and religion. They're a way for everyone to understand each other.
This makes me think about how stories shape what we believe. We said that faith can shape our reality, but don't the stories we hear also shape our beliefs? The stories from our culture, our families, even the media.
You're absolutely right. We're always hearing stories, from the news to books and movies. All these stories shape how we see the world, what we value, and even how we act.
It's like we're each creating our own personal mythologies, mixing truth and fiction, our own experiences, and the wisdom of others.
That's a great way to put it. And it shows how important it is to be careful about the stories we let influence us. We need to think critically about the stories we hear, to look for biases, and be aware of how they might be shaping what we believe.
So it's not about rejecting all stories. It's about being smart and choosing the ones that fit our values and inspire us to live better lives.
Exactly. Stories can lift us up, challenge us, comfort us, and guide us. We get to choose the ones that feed our souls and help us become our best selves.
This has been such an amazing conversation. We started with 2 stories about faith and miracles, and we've talked about what it means to believe, the power of stories, and how we find meaning in a world that can be pretty confusing. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the big things you hope our listener takes away from all this?
Well, I think we've seen that faith, however you define it, can be really powerful. It shapes how we see things, what we do, and gives us comfort when things are tough. We've also learned that it's important to think critically, to question what we believe, and be okay with the mystery and uncertainty that's just part of being human.
And we've discovered that stories aren't just for fun. They have this amazing power to shape our beliefs, help us connect with each other, and make sense of our place in the world.
In the end, I hope this deep dive has inspired our listener to keep exploring these ideas of faith, belief, and the power of stories. These aren't things with easy answers. They're ongoing conversations we have with ourselves, with each other, and with the world around us.
That's a great way to put it. So to our listener, keep asking questions, keep searching, and keep sharing your own stories. Your journey of discovery is just beginning. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.